Looking back, we really should have expected first contact to happen in Minnesota. Not because of any particular technological advancement or cosmic significance, but because the universe has a twisted sense of humor and apparently wanted to ensure humanity's introduction to galactic society would be as awkward as humanly possible. I was there when it happened. Name's Doug Mackenzie, Senior Park Ranger at the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. July 15th, peak mosquito season, and I was just finishing up my evening rounds when this massive silver disc, looking like someone had grabbed a chrome dinner plate from a 1950s diner, descended from the clouds. Now, you'd think after years of ranger training and watching every sci-fi movie ever made, I'd have some profound words prepared for humanity's first alien encounter. Instead, what came out was, "Oh, geez, not during bug season." The ship landed in a clearing, and let me tell you, these aliens were something else. They looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a peacock, and then gave it an accountant's sense of fashion. 3 of them emerged, wearing what appeared to be environmental suits that probably cost more than my annual salary. Their leader, who I later learned was named Captain Zarel, stepped forward with this fancy translator device. Before they could even say, "Take me to your leader," or whatever, this massive cloud of mosquitoes descended on them like they'd just discovered an all-you-can-eat buffet. You haven't lived until you've seen a 7-foot-tall alien mantis peacock do what I can only describe as the galactic version of the "get these bugs off me" dance. Their environmental suits, apparently designed to withstand the vacuum of space, cosmic radiation, and probably a direct nuclear blast, did absolutely nothing against Minnesota's finest skeeters. The mosquitoes, bless their tiny bloodthirsty hearts, somehow found a way through the microscopic seams in the aliens' suits. Captain Zarel started making this high-pitched whistling sound that I'm pretty sure translated to every known curse word in the galaxy, while their science officer ran in circles swatting at the air with all 4 arms. I tried to help, I really did, pulled out my trusty can of Deep Woods Off and offered it to them. But apparently the sight of me approaching with what they probably assumed was some kind of chemical weapon just made things worse. They scrambled back into their ship faster than a raccoon raiding a campsite, leaving behind what I assume was some very expensive scientific equipment and one very confused park ranger holding a can of bug spray. The last thing I heard before their ship disappeared into the clouds was what sounded like panicked screaming in at least 3 different alien languages. I stood there for a good 5 minutes, watching the mosquitoes buzz around in disappointment at losing their exotic meal. Then I did what any reasonable person would do in this situation. I called my supervisor and left the most interesting incident report of my career. "Hey, Bill, yeah, you're going to want to sit down for this one. Remember how you always said nothing interesting ever happens on the evening shift?" What none of us knew at the time was that this little incident would spark the greatest misunderstanding in galactic history, turn Earth into the most feared planet in 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, and somehow make me, Doug Mackenzie, the galaxy's foremost expert on what would become known as Earth's Biological Warfare Division. All because some mosquitoes couldn't resist trying some alien takeout. And folks, that was just the beginning. 3 days after what would become known as the Minnesota incident, the Galactic Council held its first emergency session in over 50 years. Now, I wasn't there personally, being a simple park ranger and all, but I've seen the security footage enough times to paint you a picture. Picture, if you will, the most over-the-top space government chamber your mind can conjure. We're talking floating platforms, holographic displays, and enough dramatic lighting to make a Broadway designer jealous. Around a massive circular chamber sat representatives from over 300 species, all of them looking like they'd just been told their planets were about to explode. Admiral Pi-X, the Council's head of security and proud owner of what I can only describe as a face that looked like a concerned pufferfish, called the session to order. "Esteemed members of the Council," they announced, their spines bristling with anxiety, "we face an unprecedented threat to galactic security." The chamber's main hologram flickered to life, displaying high-resolution images of our friendly Minnesota mosquitoes, blown up to the size of small cars. Several council members fainted on the spot. Captain Zuril, still sporting several very visible bumps from their encounter, stepped forward to testify. "These biological weapons," they began, their antennae twitching with remembered trauma, "targeted our environmental suits with unprecedented precision. They deployed a proboscis capable of penetrating our most advanced defensive technology, and—" They paused dramatically. They appeared to derive pleasure from the attack. The chamber erupted in chaos. The representative from Proxima Centauri B demanded immediate quarantine of the entire Sol system. The Betelgeusians called for a preemptive strike. The vegan delegation just kept screaming, "We told you Earth was dangerous," and over, though to be fair, they say that about everything. "Order! Order in the Council!" Admiral Pix's voice boomed through the chamber. "We must approach this rationally. Our initial scans of Earth's information networks indicate these weapons are called Mosquitoes." They struggled with the pronunciation, making it sound like musk-wheat toes. The Council's chief scientist, Dr. Blip, imagine a floating jellyfish wearing glasses and a bow tie, brought up another hologram. "Our analysis suggests these biological weapons are mass-produced in what the humans call Minnesota. They appear to be deployed seasonally with peak activation during their summer months." "Seasonal bioweapons?" gasped a councillor who looked like a cross between a cedar tree and a chandelier. "The technological sophistication required to maintain such a program." That's when Junior Ambassador Clix, fresh out of the Galactic Diplomatic Academy, raised all three of their appendages. "Perhaps," they suggested, "we should consider direct diplomatic contact. Surely we can negotiate with these humans." The chamber went so quiet you could have heard a photon drop. Admiral Pix's pufferfish face somehow managed to look even more concerned. "You volunteer for this mission, Ambassador?" Clix's confidence wavered visibly. "Well, in the interest of galactic peace." "Excellent," Admiral Pix declared, clearly relieved to have found someone else to handle the problem. "We shall assemble a diplomatic team immediately. Ambassador Clix will lead the mission to establish peaceful contact with the humans and learn more about their mosquito program." The poor ambassador looked like they'd just been voted most likely to be volunteered for a suicide mission. Little did they know they'd be heading to Minnesota in January, which, depending on who you ask, might actually be worse than facing our summer mosquito squadrons. The session concluded with the creation of what they called Operation Understanding, which has got to be the most ironic name in the history of galactic diplomacy. They also established a new threat classification specifically for Earth, Category M, M for mosquito, naturally. Meanwhile, back in Minnesota, I was still filling out paperwork about the incident. You try explaining to the Department of Natural Resources why there's a perfect circle of flattened grass in the middle of a protected wilderness area, and all you can write under cause is panicked aliens versus mosquitoes. Remember Ambassador Clix? Well, they finally showed up with their diplomatic team on January 15th, during what we Minnesotans like to call "Why Do We Live Here" season. The temperature was sitting at a balmy negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and the snow was piled higher than their spacecraft. I got the call at 3 a.m. because apparently that's when all the interesting stuff happens in this job. "Mr. Mackenzie," said the voice on the other end, belonging to some government agent whose name I couldn't pronounce, "the alien diplomatic mission has arrived. They specifically requested your presence as the only human who has experience with the incident." The diplomatic team consisted of Ambassador Clix, who looked like a nervous purple octopus wearing what appeared to be 16 layers of protective gear, and 3 security experts, who were basically walking tanks with anxiety disorders. They'd also brought along Dr. Blip, the jellyfish scientist from the council meeting, who was somehow wearing even more glasses than before. "Where are they?" Ambassador Clix demanded as soon as I arrived, their tentacles twitching inside their protective bubble. "Our sensors detect no signs of your biological warfare division." I looked around at the snow-covered landscape. "Well, you see, it's winter." "Ah," Dr. Blip brightened, their bioluminescent spots glowing with academic excitement. "A seasonal deactivation protocol. Fascinating. The energy requirements to maintain such a large force in suspended animation must be astronomical. No, they're just bugs, I tried to explain. They die off or hibernate when it gets cold. The security team immediately huddled together, whispering frantically. I caught phrases like regenerative capabilities and hibernation technology being thrown around. Perhaps, Ambassador Click suggested carefully, you could show us your control facility. The what now? The facility where you coordinate your mosquito forces, they clarified, as if explaining something to a child. Look, I said, rubbing my temples, there's no facility. Mosquitoes are just insects. They're annoying, sure, but they're natural. We don't control them. Heck, we spend most of our time trying to avoid them. This caused quite a stir. Dr. Blip's glasses nearly fell off all three of their eye stalks. You're saying these weapons developed naturally on your planet? They're not weapons, I insisted. They're just bugs that drink blood to lay eggs. They're basically flying vampires, but tiny. That was apparently the wrong thing to say. One of the security experts fainted dead away, their protective armor making a sound like a dropped toolbox when they hit the snow. Ambassador Clix's color shifted from purple to a concerning shade of grey. Are you telling us, they said slowly, that your planet naturally evolved creatures that seek out other beings, penetrate their defenses and drain their bodily fluids, and you just live with this? Well, we invented bug spray, I offered helpfully. Dr. Blip was frantically taking notes. And this bug spray, it's your method of controlling these creatures when they turn against you? No, it just makes them not want to bite you most of the time, unless it's really humid, or if they're particularly determined, or if you missed a spot. The remaining security experts took up defensive positions around Ambassador Clix, who was looking more disturbed by the second. Mr. Mackenzie, they said with forced calm, would it be possible to examine one of these creatures? For purely scientific purposes, of course. Well, you'll have to wait until spring, I explained. They don't come out in winter, but I've got some educational videos on my phone if you want to see them in action. The next hour consisted of me showing them mosquito documentaries while they took copious notes and jumped at every sudden movement. The security team was particularly disturbed by the close-up footage of mosquito proboscises in action. Dr. Blip, on the other hand, was disturbingly fascinated by the whole thing. Just to be clear, Ambassador Click said after watching a particularly detailed video about mosquito life cycles, these creatures emerge every year, in massive numbers, capable of bypassing most known defensive technologies, and you have no central control over them? Pretty much, yeah. And your species just adapted to live alongside them? Well, we complain about it a lot, but yeah. The ambassador turned to their team. We're going to need a bigger report. The Great Galactic Panic. Have you ever watched a piece of news go viral? Now imagine that happening on a galactic scale. The diplomatic team's report spread through the Galactic Council faster than a rumor at a small-town bingo night, and let me tell you, it did not get more accurate in translation. By the time I was called in to give my first galactic media interview, the story had evolved into something that would have made Hollywood sci-fi writers blush. According to the galactic press, Earth was a death world that had weaponized its own parasitic fauna through millions of years of cooperation, creating an unstoppable army of microscopic assassins that could penetrate any defense. The interview itself was interesting. Picture me, a park ranger who usually talks to scout troops about leave-no-trace camping, sitting in front of a panel of alien journalists who looked like they were reporting from inside bomb shelters. Ranger Mackenzie, the first journalist began, their eye stalks quivering. Is it true that human children are immunized against the mosquito forces at birth? Well, we do tend to build up a tolerance to the itching. This led to headlines like, humans genetically engineered children to resist bioweapons. Another reporter, who appeared to be some sort of sentient crystal formation, chimed in. Our sources suggest that humans have developed specialized force field technology to protect themselves during mosquito season. Can you confirm? You mean screen doors and bug nets? Yeah, I guess. The resulting article, Earth's Advanced Force Field Technology Confirmed. But my personal favorite was the lifestyle correspondent who looked like a fashionable cloud of gas, wearing designer accessories. They asked with all seriousness, "Is it true that humans perform ritual sacrifices of their blood to maintain their alliance with the Mosquito forces? I mean, not intentionally, but my last camping trip felt that way." By the end of the week, I had somehow become the galaxy's foremost expert on what they were calling terrestrial micro-vampire warfare. My inbox was flooded with interview requests, speaking invitations, and at least 3 marriage proposals from various alien species who were apparently very impressed by anyone who could survive regular mosquito exposure. The panic really kicked into high gear when Dr. Blip published their scientific analysis. Their paper, titled Natural Warfare, Evolution's Perfect Weapon, became the most cited scientific work in galactic history. They'd basically concluded that mosquitoes were the result of millions of years of evolutionary engineering, and that humans were either the most brilliant or most terrifying species in the galaxy for having adapted to live alongside them. The galactic response was swift and frankly hilarious. Species across 3 spiral arms began developing anti-mosquito defense systems. The Proximan Defense Force unveiled their new Atmoshield technology, which was basically a really expensive version of bug spray. The Beetlejuiceans started marketing human-grade environmental suits that were, I kid you not, just regular hazmat suits with extra mesh layers. Some entrepreneurial alien species even started selling authentic Earth survival gear. I once saw a catalogue advertising genuine human mosquito defense apparatus that was just a baseball cap with a head net, marked up to cost more than a small spacecraft. The really fun part was watching the conspiracy theories develop. My personal favorite was the one about how mosquitoes were actually microscopic surveillance drones controlled by human thoughts. Then there was the widely circulated theory that Minnesota was actually a top-secret training facility where we perfected our mosquito-based combat techniques. I tried explaining that Minnesota was just really wet, and that mosquitoes really liked wet places, but this somehow led to a 3-hour galactic news special about Earth's hydrological warfare program. Admiral Poix, who by this point was taking anxiety medication by the gallon, issued a statement declaring Earth a Category M+ threat, the plus apparently standing for mostly harmless except for the terrifying blood-drinking swarms. The whole situation reached peak absurdity when a group of galactic doomsday preppers started stockpiling what they thought was mosquito repellent, but was actually just bottles of teriyaki sauce due to a translation error. This led to a lot of very confused aliens dousing themselves in marinade, which surprisingly didn't work any worse than actual bug spray. All this time I kept trying to explain that mosquitoes were just as much of a nuisance to us as they were to aliens, but nobody wanted to hear it. As far as the galaxy was concerned, humans were either brilliant bioengineers playing dumb or completely insane for considering mosquito attacks mildly annoying instead of civilization-ending catastrophes. Earth's tourism industry, meanwhile, was experiencing a very unusual problem. Everybody wanted to visit, but only during winter. Minnesota, of all places, became the #1 alien tourist destination from December to February. Try explaining to a group of alien tourists why they shouldn't be disappointed that they can't see any mosquitoes during their visit to the Mall of America in January. Remember how I mentioned alien winter tourism? Well, that's what led to what the Galactic Council now refers to as the incident, though personally I prefer to call it the time I had to explain bug zappers to an entire planet. It started when a tourist from Proxima Centauri b decided to extend their stay into early spring. Despite approximately 47 warning signs, 12 safety briefings, and one very exasperated park ranger, yours truly, telling them it was a bad idea, they insisted on experiencing authentic Earth conditions. They got their wish. One mosquito, just one, managed to get caught in their environmental suit when they were packing up to leave. And because the universe has a sense of humor that rivals a cosmic pratfall comedian, they didn't notice until they were back home. I got the emergency call at 3 a.m. again. This time it was Admiral Poix themselves, their pufferfish face looking like it was about to explode. Ranger Mackenzie, they wheezed. We have a Codem situation on Proxima Centauri B. We need your expertise immediately. Codem, I asked, still half asleep. Mosquito, they screamed, causing my phone to glitch. One of your biological weapons has escaped containment. Now, I'm no expert on alien biology, that's Dr. Blip's job, but apparently Proximan biochemistry is like an all-you-can-eat buffet for mosquitoes. That one mosquito found itself in paradise, with no natural predators and about 6 billion potential food sources who had absolutely no immunity to Earth insects. By the time I arrived after being rushed there in what they called a diplomatic emergency vessel but looked suspiciously like a panic room with engines, the situation had already escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. The entire planet was in lockdown. Citizens were only traveling in sealed environmental pods. The Planetary Defense Force had converted their orbital defense system to track objects the size of mosquitoes, which was causing all sorts of problems with space traffic control. I was immediately taken to their planetary defense headquarters, where I found myself standing in front of their entire military command structure, trying to explain the concept of bug zappers. "So," said the Proximan general, who looked like a cross between a sea anemone and a disco ball, "you're saying these devices lure the creatures with light and then eliminate them with electricity?" "No." "Yeah, pretty much. We also have these things called citronella candles." "Primitive but effective warfare technology," someone shouted from the back of the room. They immediately began mass-producing what they called enhanced electromagnetic mosquito elimination grids, basically bug zappers the size of billboards. The sound of these things going off was like a continuous thunderstorm, and the light show was visible from orbit. But the real problem started when they discovered their standard atmospheric chemical weapons, their version of bug spray, had no effect on Earth mosquitoes. In fact, some of the compounds seemed to attract them. This led to the creation of what they called the Mosquito Countermeasures Division, which was literally their top military scientists trying to reverse engineer off deep woods. I spent 3 weeks trying to teach them basic mosquito control techniques. You haven't lived until you've tried to explain the concept of standing water elimination to a species that considers large bodies of stagnant water a cultural delicacy. "But where will we store our ceremonial swamp water?" one official demanded. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that got us into this situation," I replied, slowly developing a headache. The mosquito population, meanwhile, was having the time of their lives. Turned out that Proximan blood was not only delicious, but also provided some sort of super nutrient that let the mosquitoes grow about 20% larger than normal. This led to what Dr. Blip excitedly called rapid adaptation to xenobiological food sources, and what I called, "Oh great, now they're bigger." The final straw came when they discovered that their planet's native insectivores, something that looked like a cross between a dragonfly and a disco ball, they had a lot of naturally bioluminescent species, had developed a taste for mosquitoes and were becoming increasingly aggressive in hunting them. "The creatures are turning our own wildlife against us," the Proximan general wailed during one particularly dramatic meeting. "No," I tried to explain, "this is actually good news. It's natural population control. They're weaponizing our ecosystem." I gave up trying to explain and just started shipping them crates of bug zappers and mosquito netting. Within a month, they had developed what they called a comprehensive planetary mosquito defense grid, which was essentially turning their entire planet into one giant screened-in porch. You might think that having one of your native species cause a planet-wide panic would be bad for diplomatic relations. Turns out it was probably the best thing that could have happened to Earth's position in galactic politics. The Galactic Council's annual security review listed Earth as too dangerous to invade for the 3rd year running. Their official threat assessment read, "Any attempt to establish military presence on Earth would result in immediate exposure to autonomous micro-vampire swarms with unknown deployment capabilities." We didn't correct them. Admiral Pyex, who had finally embraced their role as the galaxy's leading mosquito paranoia advocate, presented a 4-hour speech about the dangers of underestimating Earth's biological defense capabilities. The fact that they did this while wearing what appeared to be a modified beekeeper's suit only added to the dramatic effect. Dr. Blip, meanwhile, had become the galaxy's leading expert on what they called terrestrial micro-vampire studies. They'd published several more papers with titles like The Strategic Implications of Seasonal Bioweapon Hibernation and Human Psychological Adaptation to Continuous Micro-Vampire Exposure, a Study in Evolutionary Terror. The Proximum incident had unexpected benefits too. Their new mosquito defense system was so effective that other species started paying them enormous sums for the technology. They became the galaxy's leading manufacturer of bug control equipment, which they marketed under the brand name Earth-grade defense systems. Earth itself got special protected status, not because of any diplomatic agreements or military treaties, but because nobody wanted to risk exposure to what they still insisted on calling our Biological Warfare Division. We became a sort of galactic wildlife preserve, with warning buoys around the solar system displaying messages like "Caution, Native Micro-Vampire Habitat," and warning, "Uncontrolled Bioweapon Zone." Tourism actually increased, believe it or not. We started getting what the Galactic Tourism Board called extreme experience seekers, adrenaline junkies from across the galaxy who wanted to experience the thrill of visiting a planet where the wildlife actively tried to drink your blood. They all came equipped with enough protective gear to survive a nuclear war, but they came nonetheless. Minnesota capitalized on this by creating special mosquito safari tours during the summer months. Picture this: a group of aliens in sealed environmental suits, following a guide through the boundary waters, taking pictures of mosquitoes like they were observing lions on the Serengeti. We even started selling "I Survived Earth's Micro-Vampires" t-shirts, which became the must-have souvenir across the galaxy. As for me, well, I somehow ended up with the official title of Chief Terrestrial Micro-Vampire Relations Officer, which looks absolutely ridiculous on my business cards, but comes with some pretty nice perks. I spend most of my time these days giving lectures to alien military academies about Earth's biological defense strategies, which mostly consists of me trying not to laugh while explaining bug spray and citronella candles as if they're advanced military technology. The really funny part, some of the younger alien species have started trying to claim they have their own micro-vampire programs. Last week I had to evaluate a species claim that they had weaponized their equivalent of fruit flies. Admiral Puix was not amused. Dr. Blip still sends me research papers to review, all of which seem to conclude that humans must be either the galaxy's greatest military strategists or completely insane. I'm pretty sure we're just really good at adapting to annoying situations, but I keep that opinion to myself. The Galactic Council recently voted to establish what they call the Earth Containment Protocol, which is basically a fancy way of saying they're going to leave us alone and hope our mosquitoes don't learn space travel. They even set up a permanent quarantine zone around our solar system, marked by warning beacons that broadcast in 50 different languages. Danger. Uncontrolled micro-vampire habitat. Enter at own risk. And you know what? That's just fine by us. Earth might not have the most advanced technology in the galaxy, or the biggest military, or the strongest economy, but what we do have is a reputation as the species crazy enough to evolve alongside blood-drinking insects, and consider it merely an inconvenience. Sometimes the best defense isn't a strong military or advanced technology. Sometimes it's just having wildlife so annoying that nobody wants to deal with it. As I like to tell my alien audiences at the end of my lectures, on Earth we don't just survive mosquito season, we plan picnics during it. That usually gets me a standing ovation, followed by several minutes of concerned murmuring. And that, folks, is how mosquitoes became more feared than nuclear weapons in the galaxy. Not because they're actually that dangerous, but because sometimes the most effective deterrent is simply being the species that looks at a blood-drinking swarm of insects and says, I've seen worse. Though I have to admit I'm a little worried about next summer. I heard some of the alien tourists talking about wanting to experience black fly season.